Hello, everyone, and welcome to the JSAC STEMCast. For those of you who are relatively new, the goal of this podcast is to get people interested in STEM and show that science, technology, engineering, and math are all around us, and the possibilities in a STEM career are endless and increasing every day. If you're asking yourself, what does JSAC stand for? Don't worry. JSAC stands for the Johnson STEM Activity Center. JSAC has been serving Atlanta's children for over a decade as a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Our mission is to empower students from diverse and underserved communities through exposure to science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Hello everyone, my name is Sophia Huynh and I will be today's guest host. A little bit about me, I am a rising freshman at Columbia University this fall. I love meeting new people and making extensive lists on great new places to eat on my travels. Now, today's podcast is something you might not expect to be related to STEM. Movies. More specifically, time warping and time travel. What is time warping? How much of what is portrayed in the media possible in real life? And what constitutes the idea of going into the future or into the past? These questions and more are what I'll be discussing with my amazing guest today. Today's guest is an incoming freshman at Northwestern University, where she plans to study industrial engineering. Although she took one physics class in high school, she has never studied quantum physics, at least not yet. One of the things she loves to do in her spare time is watch movies, and today she's here to talk about how time travel is portrayed in these different time warping movies. Raise the roof for Katherine London. Hi, Katherine. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a good afternoon. Nice weather out today.
Oh, yes. Great. So to start off in your bio, it mentions that you want to study industrial engineering. So for those who might not know, what is industrial engineering and what does one do as an industrial engineer?
Industrial engineering, it's a little bit more businessy than some of the other engineerings. You still get all the math, science, and the engineering, but there's more interaction with people. You might be a consultant as an industrial engineer, or you could have a job that a mechanical engineer might have. Unlike other engineerings, it's not really you get a job as an industrial engineer, it's more about getting a job that uses what you've learned. Maybe a chemical engineer, they would say, oh, I have a job as a chemical engineer. You would probably not say, oh, I'm an industrial engineer. You would say, I'm a consultant, or I work in manufacturing, depending on what job you get.
Yeah, cool. So why did you want to study industrial engineering? What got you interested in the topic itself?
I had always liked my math and science classes, so I thought engineering seemed like a good next step that I wanted to do and I was interested in. And so I just started looking into the different types of engineering, and industrial engineering caught my eye just because, you get to interact with more people. Also, my mom studied industrial engineering, so she put in a good word for it.
Nice. Yes. So, when did you first get involved in STEM?
I think I just first got involved in STEM when I started liking my math classes. So, first grade, I would race to do my math problems in class, and it's just grown from there. Some of my high school math and science classes I especially liked, that was making me think, okay, maybe this could be my actual career.
How do you think STEM impacts the lives of everyone around us?
I mean, there's lots of ways that are just obvious. You drive your car,
yeah.
Things like that. There's also things you wouldn't think about, like how long the traffic lights are, so that everything flows nicely on the roads. Pretty much everything has STEM in it. So if you're looking at something, I bet it's got STEM.
Yes. What were your STEM classes like in high school? Do you have a favorite one that you remember?
They were all good. One of my favorites that I remember is Physics C, AP Physics C. I took that class, and taking that class, I was like, wow, I'm really enjoying this. Maybe, I should look into engineering or some sort of physics. And I took that when I was a junior, so I was able to factor that in to when I was searching for a college.
Do you think there might be some kind of gender gap? A lot of times there's a lot of talks of gender gaps, especially in STEM careers. Do you think that's kind of prevalent in industrial engineering as well?
I don't think it would be any more so prevalent than maybe in other STEM careers. It's probably not the one with the biggest gap or the one with the smallest gap. It's just just like everything else.
Yeah, do you think when learning a lot of these concepts for industrial engineering, or any engineering in general, it focuses a lot on more hands-on activities or hands-on projects to be able to learn these concepts?
I think it depends on, with an industrial engineering degree, you can do so many different things. It depends on what you would end up doing. But I think some sorts of engineering, like mechanical engineering or maybe chemical engineering, like you're going to expect to be hands-on. Industrial engineering, I think there's a lot of more options where it's more hands-off if that's something you're interested in. Like, you could definitely get a desk job.
What do you think has been your biggest obstacle in relation to STEM?
Maybe just having some hard classes sometimes. I mentioned how much I loved Physics C. I really liked the mechanics part. The electricity and magnetism part, I did not like as much. So I guess if it's harder for me to imagine it, I'm not as big of a fan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, for me, I definitely remember a lot of these classes, and a lot of it's so conceptual where it's almost hard to think about, whereas if it's something that's just right in front of me, I think for me it's easier to understand.
Right. Like, I can imagine throwing a ball, but it's harder to imagine, like, the current, going through a wire.
Yeah. Sometimes they have these really weird, I guess, word problems, right? I talked to a lot of people, like, they try to make it a lot more lifelike, but it's anything but, right? Do you have any examples of any of those problems?
Definitely. I could even get out my phone and get some of the actual wording, since I, saved them all. But, they'd have to clarify that there was no friction or things. So it'd be someone is pulling 3 penguins across a frictionless floor, or, a stiff pig slides down a slide.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, I remember there was one where you were, throwing a ladle. Lots of fun ones.
Yeah, because you obviously go into those situations all the time,
exactly.
Right?
Like, I'm always tossing a cream tangerine past the windows.
Yes. So, how might someone who's not particularly interested in STEM still find ways to interact with it through their career or maybe just in everyday life?
Maybe if, they're into video games, there's some video games that have, puzzle elements. Maybe some of them are more STEM. Or you could sort of learn some the behind-the-scenes video game stuff. As I was saying, there's STEM and everything. So whatever you like, television, video games, reading, find out some of the numbers behind how it works, and then that's a little bit more STEM.
Yeah, definitely. So now that we've talked a little bit about your STEM experience, let's start shifting into the main theme of today's show. So in this podcast, our goal is to show that STEM can be found anywhere, just like Katherine just said, even in topics that you wouldn't necessarily associate with STEM. So in your bio, we also talked a little bit about how you really enjoy watching movies. So I guess first off, what is your favorite movie?
I knew you were going to ask me this question, so I tried to put a lot of thought into it.
Yes, of course.
There's not much STEM, but I don't think any movie can beat Lion King.
I mean, it is a classic.
Really,
yeah.
I agree. The songs are great.
I mean, it's for all ages,
Yeah,
has a good theme, good plot. Yeah. It teaches you a lot of different things,
It's not missing anything.
Yeah, great. So I guess going more into our other theme, which is more specifically time warping, time looping movies, what's kind of one of your favorite movies that falls under that category?
Right. This is another example of movies, just seems like a general topic, but there's STEM within it, with the time warping and the time traveling. I think my favorite movie that has time travel in it is Palm Springs, but a lot of them are good. Groundhog Day, Back to the Future, they're all good.
Yeah. What do you think is the difference between time warping and time traveling? A lot of people might think it's the same thing, they're kind of connected. What's the difference between both of those two?
Right. I mean, I think they are pretty similar, and just in everyday life, people would use the terms interchangeably, and it wouldn't really matter. One of the ways I think about it, not that this is super based in fact, but time travel feels more active. It's like, oh, let me travel back to 3 days ago, whereas time warp sort of happens to you. But, more based in reality, a time warp is sort of the actual being of it. Like, something with a lot of mass, a star or a black hole, would sort of cause a time warp, or if you were moving really fast, at the speed of light, also cause a time warp. I mean, everything does, but a baseball is not big enough to really make a difference. And then the time travel is more of like the result. The time warp is sort of the thing, and the time travel is the result.
Oh, nice. So a lot of people categorize when we talk about time warping with also time looping. Can you kind of describe both of those two together?
Sure. I mean, once again, I think the time warp is sort of like the vehicle for the time loop. When I say time loop compared to time travel, for time loop, it's sort of one of those situations where it's like you're reliving the same day over and over again, Groundhog Day style. When I think of time loop, maybe it's just the same hour over and over again or something. Meanwhile, time travel, I mean, technically in a time loop, you're time traveling back. But when I think of time travel, I think more like Back to the Future. Let's just go to 50 years ago and just do whatever we want.
Yeah, so would you say time traveling's more linear? So you could either go to the future or the past, but no matter what, it's that starting point, and then it just keeps on going forward. Whereas a time loop is more circular, I guess. So whether it's the same hour, same day, you're still reliving that process. So no matter how many hours or minutes, it doesn't go forward. It just keeps at that same spot.
Yeah, I suppose I would say that. Definitely a time loop, the way I imagine it most simply, is, almost like a roller coaster with like a loop-de-loop in it. Like,
yeah.
You go, you do the loop, and then you keep on going, except maybe it has a ton of loops
yeah.
until you finally get out of the loop part of the roller coaster and you just proceed.
Mm-hmm.
For time travel, my favorite types of time travel are linear, where it's just sort of all one line. But a lot of times time travel, the theories of it is that it will create multiple
dimensions.
Multiple timelines, I guess. So then it's not really a straight line or one timeline. It's sort of like a family tree, all starting from one original timeline that's branched out into all of these new timelines. So that's not that linear, but I guess if you looked at one timeline, it would be linear.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what would you say generally categorizes a movie as a time warping movie? So what specific traits does it have to have?
I mean, for me, if there's time travel in it or a time loop in it, then I'm thinking, okay, this is like a time warp, time travel type movie. But if the time travel is going to be like a really small aspect of it, then I wouldn't really say, oh, it's a time travel movie. Like, it's got to be central to the plot. Once again, like Groundhog Day, Back to the Future, like that. The entire plot is the existence of this time travel, time warp, time loop.
Yeah, so it can't really be this side thing that happens like 5 minutes into the movie. It has to be the whole basis of the movie. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah. Or, maybe if it's like superheroes and like there's a team of like 6 and one of them time travels once in the movie. It's like, okay, there's time travel in the movie. Like, it's interesting to talk about, as far as a conversation on time travel in movies. But I wouldn't be like, oh, this is a time travel movie. What's to happen?
So, when looking at these time warping movies, how much of it do you think is related to science? And do you think the idea or concept itself is plausible?
Well, certainly the concept of time warps, I feel, is plausible. Like if you could stick a clock next to a black hole, it would tick differently than the one on your watch, at least from your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they really are bringing that into the movies. I'm sure there's some movies where they thought, oh, wouldn't it be fun if we tried to make this as accurate as possible? But I'm sure that sort of quickly went off the rails. They were like, well, it's also got to have a coherent plot. Like, any type of time travel that seems realistic is not fun enough to make a movie about. So, maybe they try and have some realistic things, but they gotta have a good movie at the end of it.
Yeah, obviously. A lot of people, when they talk about these concepts, or the concept of time warping, time traveling, they bring up a lot of quantum physics or quantum mechanics, kind of to connect the two more and to base it more into reality. For those people who might not know, what is quantum physics or quantum mechanics? Are they the same thing? They're used interchangeably? Like, what is it?
Right. They're both sort of like part of the same thing, just like a slightly different, view on the same sorts of ideas.
Yeah.
And it's just sort of relating everything down to atoms and particles. So it's like movement, time, energy, all relating it down to atoms, particles. Energy comes up a lot, especially when you're talking about time travel.
How might learning about quantum physics help you in your daily life? Do you think it would change your perspective on how you view the world itself?
I could probably be able to I would probably be able to go through my everyday life, just the same, not that much of a difference. But, maybe I would keep more tabs on what NASA's doing, and I would be more like, oh, wow, that is really cool. Because right now, sometimes I'll see NASA does stuff, and I'm like, I don't really know what that means, so I guess it means interesting. But I feel like if I knew a lot about quantum physics, I'd be like, whoa, a black hole, and I would know to be excited about it.
Yeah. How might knowing quantum physics help your interest in industrial engineering, if so?
I feel like there's probably not that much overlap. I mean, once you're within STEM, but I guess, both of them being STEM, there's a fair amount of overlap. But, if I knew all of quantum physics going in, I bet my physics classes would be easier. But other than that, they're sort of separate.
Yeah. In many movies, there's a lot of different boundaries and rules for time travel. For example, in one movie, like the butterfly effect, you can't speak or touch anything, or you can drastically change the outcome or the future of that whole dimension or the world. Whereas in another movie, the main character can probably go back in time and do whatever the heck they want with no consequences. So what's your opinion on not having set boundaries when it comes to time warping?
I definitely think there should be boundaries, and I think the movie needs to set those boundaries, because if they don't make it clear how this time travel is going to work from the beginning, then the whole time you're just confused, being like, I didn't know that was part of the rules. I think it's important for making a good movie that there's consequences, that you can't just go back in time, do whatever you want, and come back and nothing's changed, because there has to be consequences for the actions, otherwise it's not an interesting movie. Like, you have to believe that something could go wrong. I think my favorite type of time travel, in Harry Potter, the third book, when Hermione has that time turner, I really like that one because it's all one timeline. So it's not like you can go back into the past and change the future. If you go back in time, like, you could talk to yourself from 3 hours ago and it wouldn't change things, because, like, the first time you're living it through, you from the future is already back there doing things at the same time, whether or not you realize it. So I like that because it's just one timeline, very peaceful. But some of them, like Back to the Future, there's consequences. He goes back and then his parents start to, like, not fall in love, so he starts to disappear. Luckily, I mean, for him, he gets it back together.
Yeah.
But he certainly has consequences for his actions there. And, talking about, you said the butterfly effect movie you said, where, like, you can't see anything or touch anything. That reminds me of, there's this one book, The Sound of Thunder, it might be The Sounds of Thunder, where it was, like, a sci-fi book set in, I think, 2050, around there, and in it there was time travel, and you could go back in the past on dinosaur hunting expeditions. And the way that they made the dinosaur expedition safe was they would, like, tag the dinosaurs they knew were going to die naturally anyway, so you could kill them, and then a tree would fall on the dead dinosaur, and you didn't affect the future. But you had to walk on this levitating path, and the guy accidentally stepped off the path and killed a butterfly, or maybe just a mosquito. But when he went back to the future, things were different. So that was, like, an interesting book, also about the butterfly effect. It's like that one little mosquito changed so many things in the future.
Yeah, that's also really interesting. Do you think having so many set boundaries, though, from a movie creating aspect, does that kind of stop kind of that creativity and that artistic liberty that those people might have? Or do you think it actually might even strengthen the movie itself because it has these set rules, so it makes more sense for the audience?
Right. I mean, it might, cramp your style a little bit in the writer's room if you want to do something, and then the other writers are like, no, we said in our time travel, you can't do that, or whatever. That could be annoying, but I do think it's important for there to be boundaries, because if you're just doing whatever you want throughout the whole movie, it's going to be hard. Once again, I was saying before, like, the audience has to believe there's consequences. The audience is going to be like, there seems to be no rules. Like, why do I don't understand what's happening. I don't care what's happening,
Yeah. So talking about boundaries again, what do you think, in your opinion, are some boundaries that all time warping or time travel movies should have?
I don't want to lay down any hard laws, because if you can make a good movie with some crazy time travel rules, do it. But some rules that I think it would be hard to make a good movie without is, I feel like you got to be able to keep your memories of the time that you time traveled. And also, if it's a time travel back to the past situation, I feel like you have to be able to affect the future. If it's sort of like Back to the Future style time travel. But as I say that, I said my favorite time travel was from Harry Potter, where it's like you were there the whole time. But I feel like a lot of time travel movies, they don't like that because that doesn't add as much drama.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going, you can affect the future. You got to actually be able to affect the future. You can't have to it.
Yeah, definitely. In your opinion, because a lot of movies don't have these set boundaries, they always have some sort of plot hole. So what are some of the plot holes that occur in these time warping movies, and how do you think they affect the mechanisms of time travel in that movie building world?
Right. The movies that I think I want to talk about plot holes in, well, mostly Palm Springs and how it affects their time travel. But I'll also quickly mention Groundhog Day, which, the news anchor gets stuck reporting on Groundhog Day over and over again. He's sort of like a cynical dude. And then, spoiler, eventually he just, becomes a better person and gets out of it. But they don't really talk too much about, the mechanisms of the time loop. And I think that serves that movie well, because you're not bogged down thinking about, how does this work? It's just, you just accept it and move forward in the movie. But in Palm Springs, they do get a little bit more into it, which is definitely interesting. I mean, in the end, they end up getting out of the time loop by learning about quantum physics and then using that knowledge to escape.
Mm-hmm.
But they just went for a couple more jokes. I think this is an example where they didn't lay down the laws in the writer's room.
Yeah.
They had a loose idea, and they were like, oh, wouldn't that be funny if that happened? And then they were just throwing it in. I've thought about the plot holes or the weird things that line up in this movie a lot. Something that I have not even spent any time thinking on. One time dinosaurs walked by. They were they were like, whoa, look off the distance. There were dinosaurs there. Okay. And I'm sure the writers were like, oh, what a fun joke, There's no way to explain the dinosaurs, and I don't even want to begin to try. But the main plot hole, or not, I don't even want to say plot hole, because it just plot interesting factoid, was, so they were in a time loop, and you could go into this time loop by walking into this sort of, I don't want to say magical, but weird cave.
Yeah.
It was glowing, it sort of made a noise, I was like, oh. If you walked into this cave, you would get stuck in the time loop, and there were 3 people stuck in the time loop. Well, at the end, 2 of them escape together, but before they escape, they call the 3rd guy, and they say, hey, we're about to escape, just FYI, I want to let you know. Okay? They end up escaping successfully, so they move on to the next day. Maybe they escaped on Saturday, because they were reliving Saturday. They move on to Sunday. The other guy, he resets his day, because he's still in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, okay, let me go talk to them and see how it went. He goes trying to talk to them, and when he talks to them, it's them from before they were ever stuck in the loop.
Yeah.
So, here's the thing for me. Because now they've exited the loop, but he's still looping. So it's sort of like we were talking about the roller coaster. If there was just a ton of loops, you could eventually get out. Well, he's still looping, but they got out. But if he gets out of the loop now, is he just going to be on the same track as them? I don't know. Because when they escaped the loop with all of the consequences of the actions done on their last day. And so they left him in the loop. Now, if he escapes the loop, he'll leave with all the consequences of his last day, right? And something that existed on his last day were the 2 other characters pre-loop. So, I don't even know. Would he be able to go talk to them and be like, man, wasn't our time in the time loop crazy?
Yeah.
I don't think he would be able to say that, because their names were Niles and Sarah. I think the Niles and Sarah he left didn't have any knowledge of the time loop. So there's definitely at least 2 timelines coming out of this. The 2 people escape the time loop together timeline, and the 3rd guy they left behind escaped the time loop. But if further, adding more timelines, these time loop movies ask us to believe that the same people would do the exact same things under the exact same circumstances. So the original guy who got stuck in the time loop, after he escaped, him pre-time loop was still in the time loop with the third guy. Would the original him not make whatever dumb decision got him stuck in the time loop in the first place again?
So then it's a continuous circle.
Exactly. So it's just like, he's out of the time loop celebrating, like, yeah, I made it. Little does he know he just cursed another version of himself to the exact same fate.
Yeah, definitely. So we're talking a lot about these time warping movies and kind of what they could have done differently or some plot holes. If you were in a time warping movie, what would you do?
Okay. I would definitely... First, I would freak out. Then I would binge all the shows that have been on my list that I haven't been able to get to.
Oh, yeah, because you have unlimited time.
Exactly. And then I would try and get really good at a lot of skills like they do. I think it would be trying to find my way out the whole time. I don't want to be so bold as to be like, no, I would totally mentally be able to accept it fast and, like, get to work, getting really good at pole vaulting or whatever. But I feel like I would be able to get to work, learn some things. But I would want to be trying to get out the whole time.
Definitely.
Try and figure out, is the situation more like Groundhog Day where there really was no cause? Like, he didn't do anything to get himself stuck. He just woke up and was like, it's the same day, Or is it more like Palm Springs where it's like, I walked into this cave. There's got to be some way to, like, walk out of the cave.
Yeah.
So maybe I would try and better myself as a person. Because, if it's the Groundhog Day style time loop, then I might as well just spend my time, becoming a piano master, because that's all that's going to get me out, being a better person.
Yeah, definitely.
So maybe I would learn quantum physics if I was stuck in the time loop, so I'd better understand it. That's what the girl in Palm Springs did as well.
Exactly. Do you think the concept of age progresses through the time loop? I mean, if you're reliving the same day, then your body's really resetting from that day that you started. So technically, are you, like, you can never die unless you get into an accident? And does your body just never grow old and only your mind, in your opinion?
Well, even in the time loop movies, at least Groundhog Day and Palm Springs, if you die, you just reset the loop.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate for them, because they're like, what happens in the movies is they get so psyched out for being in the time loop, they're like, I can't take this anymore, so they try to die, and they just wake up again. So at least the way it works in the movies is that their body doesn't age, they stay the same age the whole time, which it would really suck if you were, like, stuck in one day, but you kept getting older.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I don't know enough about neuropsychology or, like, how brains work to know if their brain would get older, just from all the added knowledge. But I feel like they would stay the same age, because when the time resets, I guess so does the time's effects on their body.
Yeah. I took a neuropsychology class, but I definitely would not say, like, I'm in neuropsychology.
No, let's hear your expert opinion.
Okay, great. In my opinion, though, I think, well, the interesting concept of, like, forgetting, right? You forget. That's actually necessary for the brain, because if you're remembering so many things, then you can't get to the information that you need at that moment, right? So let's say that you keep reliving the same day, but you still have the same memories. That's going to take an enormous toll on your brain. So I feel like even though your body necessarily is staying the same way every day as you relive that, your brain's still going to, like, slowly, no matter how many times, it might, like, stop working, or because the traumatic effects of just, like, you're reliving the same day, it's gonna get monotonous. A lot of times people don't know how to react, and if you can't find a way out, then you're just basically almost living with yourself and your own thoughts, because everybody has the same reactions, right? That takes a lot of mental toll on the brain and your psyche and just everything in general. I feel like even if you didn't age, it's almost like a curse, right? The curse of immortality, right? Exactly. So almost at that time, like, even if your mind or your body doesn't age, I guess, like, your internal self does, if that makes sense.
I mean, the fact that now you're telling me I'm going to run out of memory space is so rough for my plan. I was planning on learning everything, was really my goal. No, I guess I have to pick and choose. Like, I can't watch every show and also learn how to play every sport. I gotta pick and choose my favorites.
I mean, you could. You just probably, after a while, you just won't remember anything that happened in that show that you watched.
I guess I can just rewatch the shows.
Yeah, I know.
Maybe it's a blessing. You get to experience your favorite show for the first time again.
Exactly. It can be a blessing and a curse.
Exactly.
So, for our last few questions, trying to tie in together those two different interests, so industrial engineering and all these time warping movies, what careers could industrial engineers have when working in the movie production area?
Yeah, I would say probably movie production. You know, there's a whole team of people who do all different things. Maybe you work for the movie lot and you help them organize how they're going to use all their different things. Maybe they don't need to buy as many cameras if they just use the ones they have more efficiently. That's probably the type of job someone with an industrial engineering degree might have. Maybe you're a consultant who consults on different movie things. You know, maybe you work with, like, what are people liking? What should we produce? I mean, that's more producer things, but, you know, maybe a movie company really sucks at that, so they hire consultants to help them.
Yeah, definitely. So for our last few questions, what advice would you give people who are interested in both STEM and movies, and how could they intertwine those two interests into a career?
I would say try and do something on the production side of movies, because I feel like, you know, with movies, like I was saying, it's not just the actors and, like, the script writers. There's plenty of people who are moving things around, directing, but I don't mean, like, the directors. I mean, like, directing where things have to go.
Yeah,
planning
definitely.
It out,
yeah, like all the behind the scenes too,
yeah,
like camera work. Yeah.
Too. I mean, that's a little bit more construction, but maybe you're like planning the set building, like in charge of set building. That's pretty STEMmy, I would imagine. Or maybe if you become an expert, maybe there's a time travel movie and they want to make it accurate. You know, they hire a consultant, or I'm sure, you know, all those medical shows have a medical consultant there, even if a lot of times they might ignore what they say.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, you could be like the expert consultant helping to make, you know, some STEM movie as accurate as possible.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Catherine. I had a wonderful time speaking to you about crazy topics. So time warping, just industrial engineering, trying to tie those two together, and immortality. Right. Exactly. Well, thank you so much. It was a pleasure having you on today.
Yes. Love the JSAC STEMcast.
Oh, yes, of course. Bye.